Well, welcome to my workshop. I'm here to give you a tour of my dust collection system. It has three main parts. There's the dust collector itself, a 1.5 horsepower unit. There's an ambient air purifier hanging up on the ceiling. And then there's my chop saw dust station, which is featured in the March issue of Canadian Home Workshop. That's the show issue that you can get right here. Let's get right into some specifics now. I chose this dust collector for a couple of reasons. First of all, it has a fairly small footprint. As you can see, it nestles in between my thickness planer and the back end of my table saw. It also is one of the few dust collectors in this size category that has a canister filter. It's pleated, so it has a large surface area, and it's got some internal cleaning paddles too. When I move this handle, the rubber paddles brush up against the inside of the filter pleats, and they knock off the accumulation of very fine dust that always builds up in that place. It's easy to go out and buy dust collection equipment. What's more challenging is how you put all that together in a way that actually works properly and is convenient in your home shop. And that's why I want you to take a look at the stuff you see here, beginning with the blast gate. This is a sliding valve that allows you to control whether or not vacuum suction gets to a machine. I like this style because it slides in such a way as to clean out the groove from sawdust that builds up. The only problem with this design is that the flanges on either side are really quite short. So short, in fact, that you can't reliably fasten a flex hose to them. So what I do is to take a short length of rigid pipe, then I use polyurethane foam and Tapcon screws to join that section of pipe to the blast gate, giving me a little bit of extra length so I can fasten the flex pipe with a special clamp like you see here. There are lots of different clamps you can use to fasten flex hose to rigid pipe, but I especially like this one right here. It's a screw clamp, but it's got what's called a bridge, so it goes up and over the spiral metal core that's in this flex hose and holds it really well. Some of your installation is probably going to need some rigid ducting, and the best kind to use is this spiral type. It's much stronger than the snap-together duct you get for air conditioning and furnace use. When it comes time to joining this, you need to do two things. First of all, you need to seal the joints. Aluminum tape, like you see here, is excellent. It's far better than duct tape because once it goes down, it doesn't move or creep or change. After you've sealed the joint with the tape, go over top with at least 3 and preferably 4 small Tapcon screws to lock that joint together, just like you see here. There are 3 things I want to explain about what's going on here. First of all, the elbow is what they call a wide sweep elbow. It has a more gradual bend than the typical 90-degree elbows that you'd use for heating and ventilation purposes. Second, I've wrapped the entire elbow in aluminum tape. That's because this elbow has swiveling joints, so you can adjust the angle of it slightly. And that's a great thing, but the joints will also leak quite a bit of air unless you seal them after you've put the joints together. Third and finally, I want to point out this anchoring strap. It's a galvanized perforated strap. It's quite flexible. You can cut it to length. It's great for anchoring elbows like this, and anywhere, in fact, where a horizontal run of pipe needs to be supported. The final connection you need to make to your machines is always done with some kind of flex hose. This is my favorite. It's polyurethane as opposed to the other kinds of plastics that are used. I like it because it's extra flexible. It's surprisingly tough though. It's rather difficult to cut through that polyurethane. And it's also perfectly clear, so you can see how the shavings and the dust are flowing through and whether or not there's any sort of a blockage. One other thing too. If you go to the trouble of setting up a system like this, go that extra little bit to put in a floor sweep. This is an end to a rigid pipe. It has a blast gate, so you can turn it on and off. But its purpose is to collect the sweepings that inevitably build up on your floor. Even with a setup like this, there is going to be some sawdust that hits the floor, and that's a great way to clean it up quickly. It's not unusual to have to drop down rigid pipe in the middle of a room where it can't be supported by a wall. You really do need to support the pipe in some way, and that's where this approach comes in handy here. I've made a plywood gusset. I've just clamped it to my table saw dust collection arm, and in order to secure it to the pipe, I drove long Tapcon screws through pre-drilled holes in the wood into the actual metal of the pipe. It's another reason why using spiral pipe makes so much sense, because the wall thickness of this pipe is thick enough that it can hold a screw like this, whereas regular heating and ventilation duct is far too thin to do something like that. It's not unusual to have to crimp one end of a pipe so it will go in the other end when you're attaching elbows and straight lengths together. You can do that crimping yourself if you've cut off the factory crimped end using a tool like this. It's got a bunch of different jaws that work together to create a wavy crimped pattern in the end of any piece of metal. The best way to cut rigid spiral pipe like this is with a portable power hacksaw. This is a cordless model. They're also available in corded versions, and you can get them at any tool rental shop. Thickness planers generate the largest volume of chips and shavings in the whole shop, and so of course you're going to be hooking yours up. But there's a challenge. In every thickness planer that I've seen, the dust chute comes out the back over the top of the place where the wood comes out. And the tendency is for the flex hose to hang down over the place where the wood comes out and interfere with the movement of that wood. The way around that is to twist the flex hose before you clamp up where it connects to the rigid pipe. And in the twisting, if you do it right, you can cause that hose to lift up above the place where the wood exits, and you've got clear sailing for the dusts to come out and the wood to come out. Here's another little trick that I want to show you. It's not unusual to have to sprout off different pipes from one main vacuum line. And a great way to do that is by putting several 45-degree Y fittings together. This is the first one. This is the second one that I attached to it. And that allows me to go in 3 different directions. This line goes to my table saw, this line goes to my jointer, and this smaller 2.5-inch line goes to the guard and dust collector that sits on the top of my table saw to get dust as it flies off the top of the blade during a cut. Of course, the main point of all the care you've taken with tape and clamps and Tapcon screws is to ensure a leak-free vacuum system. You don't want to waste any suction power. You want it to go all to the machine that you happen to be using. Now, the way to test the effectiveness of your sealing job is with the dust collector itself. Close all the blast gates and turn the machine on, and if you have no leaks, you'll find that the bag remains soft. It doesn't puff up like a balloon as it does when you open a blast gate and allow air into the system that inflates the dust bag. Last, but certainly not least, is my ambient air filter. I like this model because it's got a remote, it's got a timer, so I can let it run for half an hour, an hour, 2 hours after I go, and then it automatically shuts off. And it's also got an airflow indicator on the side, which lets me know when the filters are starting to get clogged. Now, when you do go to clean the filters, you'll really appreciate why this is such a useful machine, because despite all the other things I have here in my shop, this rig collects tons of the finest, most bothersome, and most dangerous dust in the whole shop. So there you have it. I hope you've learned something from a tour of my dust collection system. Here's another look.
Sometimes you speak foreign tongues on these productions. The spirit